This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm really pleased to be here today to facilitate this discussion on institutionalizing evidence use in Parliament of Ghana. We're going to be sharing reflections from the Data for Accountability project. So I just wanted to outline a couple of quick housekeeping points before we kick off. Everybody is muted at the moment, so we will ask you to stay on mute for now, but please do introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. And for the sake of bandwidth, we're going to have all of the panelists will have their videos on throughout the discussion, but we'll ask others to keep their videos off and would very much encourage you to use the chat box to submit questions and to say hello to everybody else. We are going to have a couple of rounds of Q&A for the panel, so looking forward to that interaction with you. Also, just to note that we will be sharing a recording within about 24 hours of the session, so by continuing to participate, you're giving your permission to be recorded in the discussion today. Okay, so just wanted to provide a quick framing of the Data for Accountability project. As many colleagues will know and appreciate, comprehensive data for monitoring the progress of SDG implementation is obviously really important to enable parliaments to perform their oversight and accountability role effectively. So DAP is a project which helps Parliament of Ghana to use data to oversee progress towards the SDGs. The project is led by African Centre for Parliamentary Affairs, supported by INASP and the Ghana Stats Service, and has funding from the Hewlett Foundation. It is aiming to build greater collaboration between data producers, in particular GSS and Parliament. And it uses a range of specific approaches to strengthen collaboration between data producers and Parliament. So those that are familiar with evidence-informed policy work will recognise these different levels of capacity strengthening that the project is working on, from training and mentoring of MPs, of parliamentary staff and of GSS staff, also piloting a constituency profile system, so really looking forward to hearing more about that today, to support representation, and establishing an SDG desk within the Parliamentary Research Department, as well as holding a data fair to connect producers of research and stats with users. So there's a range of capacity development approaches here, working at individual, organizational and at systems level. And it's also targeting the oversight as well as the representation functions of Parliament. So a really holistic approach within the project. So during a pandemic, of course, such as COVID-19, the need for evidence and data is more important than ever and is front for many of us. And there have been some challenges for DAP working with MPs in a year that's been disrupted both by the general election in Ghana and the closure of Parliament due to the pandemic. But DAP has been able to really take advantage of a key window of opportunity in the sector and make some really exciting progress. So really looking forward to hearing more from our panelists today about the work of the project. It is the first focused effort to introduce data for SDG monitoring to any subcommittees in Parliament. It has really strong parliamentary support from the minority and majority side, and is the first partnership between a national stats office and parliamentary strengthening organisation. So there's lots of things that are really exciting about DAP and should be really interesting to hear about today for those of us that come from the evidence-informed policy space, as well as those from the statistics and the parliamentary strengthening side. I would like to introduce our speakers today before we kick off the discussion. We have Dr. Rashid Rahman, President and CEO of the African Centre for Parliamentary Affairs, ASAPA. Rashid has led many projects working with Parliament, civil society and other stakeholders, particularly in Africa and Asia, and has been actively engaged in institutional, parliamentary, PFM, evaluation and governance work for the past 2 decades. He's carried out pioneering work with more than 30 African parliaments and a total of 50 parliaments around the world. So really pleased to have Rashid with us today. We also have with us Omar Seidu. Omar is a social statistician with over 18 years of experience in the stats production process. He is head of demographic stats and SDGs coordinator for the Ghana Stats Service. where he champions data innovation and a multi-stakeholder approach to data production and utilization, brokering strategic partnerships like this one and mobilizing resources for the stat system in Ghana. Omar is also a fellow of the sampling program for survey statisticians and a member of the UN Interagency and Expert Group on the SDGs. Welcome, Omar. Also on the panel today, we have Abraham Ibn Zakaria. Dr. Zakaria is a senior research officer in the Parliamentary Research Department with 14 years of experience in providing research service to committees, individual members and leadership of Parliament. And I know has also worked extensively on evidence-informed policy capacity strengthening projects in Ghana. Dr. Zach's research interest is evidence-informed policy making in the legislature alongside land tenure security and public policy. Welcome to Dr. Zakaria. And I believe we are also expecting Honourable BT Baba, Benson Tongo Baba, Chairman of the Poverty Reduction Strategy Committee at the Parliament of Ghana, and really delighted to be expecting Honourable Baba today. He is the NDC MP for the Talensi constituency and has been involved in the DAP project. I just want to check if we have Honourable Baba with us. We don't have a fourth video on. Hopefully, Honourable Baba will be joining us soon. So just before we kick off the discussion, I just want to outline to everybody how this is going to flow today. So we'll have two rounds of discussion. A first round of discussion where I'll be posing some questions to the panelists. And they will be responding, and then we'll have time for some audience questions and input after that, and then there'll be a second round to hear from the speakers, and then another audience questions and input round after that before we wrap up. And as part of the wrap up, all of the speakers will be invited for some kind of final last words. So I would like to kick off then with a question for Rashid. How do you think, Rashid, that general overarching issues around evidence production and use in Parliament, how do they apply specifically to data for the SDGs in Ghana?
Thank you very much, Emily. A very good morning to all our participants and then my co-panelists. Perhaps maybe let me just take a step back and provide a bit of history so that at least those that are not familiar with the Parliament of Ghana and the work that we have been doing around evidence could understand what is currently being done and the focus on SDGs. Many years ago, we did work with INASP to try and build the capacity of the research department of the Parliament of Ghana in particular around issues of evidence and how they could produce evidence to inform the general work of Parliament. In other words, supporting all the key committees, particularly those that are involved in or at the forefront of oversight work. That was work that built on previous engagements that we've done with the research department of the Parliament of Ghana with support from Star Ghana. For those who don't know, Star Ghana is a multi-donor basket fund that supports the work of civil society organizations and Parliament. So in other words, the demand and supply side of accountability. So we did some work with Star Ghana and then built on it with work with INASP. In the case of the work with INASP, it was part of a three-country initiative, Ghana, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Now, building on that, we are now implementing a project, as Emily has introduced, that we call DAP, Data for Accountability. And in this particular project, we are It's a kind of tripartite partnership. Ourselves as SEPA as a lead, and then we have the Ghana Statistical Service, and then we have INAS. That's where Emily works. And what we've been trying to do under this, of course, keeping in mind the overarching issues surrounding data production and use within the Parliament of Ghana, we have been trying to shift and change the narrative to have a focus. Of course, that's the focus of the project. The project is focused on SDGs. And we've been trying over the last 2 or so years to shift the narrative so that the focus of evidence and data, particularly as it relates to what we do together with our partners, is focused specifically on SDGs. If we step back again, even looking back to previous work and looking at the nature of the SDGs, everything that we do in our country, as well as most developing countries, I think revolve around issues of SDGs. The SDGs, if you like, were framed, I think, to deal with issues in developing countries. So, I mean, data, evidence, and any support that is being provided to our parliament, as well as most other parliaments on the continent, I believe the focus, even if it is not explicitly said, the focus is on how to help these countries to attain the targets that are set in the SDGs. But specifically for us, we've tried to shift, as I said earlier, the narrative so that it's not evidence in general, but in this case, we are dealing with evidence that will support the Parliament of Ghana and its committees and our country to achieve the SDGs. As Emily indicated, we have been working very, very closely with the Committee on Poverty Reduction, which is tasked with the responsibility of looking at issues around poverty in our country and all the issues around the SDGs. So that's one way in which we have tried to shift the narrative. We have also tried to, together with the Ghana Statistical Service, set up and institutionalize a relationship between that institution, which has a mandate in our country to produce data and evidence and be the repository of evidence, to ensure that data is provided to people like Dr. Zakaria and in the research department, as well as the various committees of parliament, so that when they do their work, at least whatever they do is informed by data that is SDG specific, so that hopefully, if there is uptake, our country can attain the SDG targets and goals that have been set. In addition, the other thing that we have done as part of changing the narrative and shifting the focus is to establish a liaison kind of relationship and an SDG desk within the Parliament of Ghana, which is supposed to be, the place for MPs to go to pick up data that can help them to do their oversight work, and also to focus mainly on how to help our country achieve the sustainable development goals. Now, I decided to give this background before perhaps going back to some of the big issues around data production and uptake and use, if you like. Now, I think maybe let me start with some of the issues around production. And I think for the sake of time, I'll be very brief here. And I'll mention just 3 issues. I mean, there is, first of all, the issue of data integrity. So for members of parliament to use data, whether it's for SDGs or in general, I think integrity issues are critical particularly because it's a political house. I mean, made up of in our country, made up of two sides, and depending on how the data is viewed, if you are not careful, the data can be labeled as being political. So that is why the issue of integrity is key. I think the second issue is the issue around capacity. And I think that is not a very difficult issue. We've been working with our colleagues in Parliament, as well as working with MPs over the years. So that is not a very big issue. Then the third, and building on these two, is trying to instill the culture of evidence generation within our parliament. So I think on the side of production, maybe these are some of the critical issues that I wanted to highlight. On the side of use and uptake, I think being a political house, we are not naive that once you generate data and it's good, integrity is checked, and there's capacity to understand and so on, then it's going to be just used by members of parliament. No, sometimes politics stands between them and the use of data, even if it's good data. Then the second issue that I want to highlight here in terms of use and uptake is the format in which, I mean, the data and evidence is provided to members of parliament. These are people who wake up every day and they walk into parliament and they have to deal with issues from A to Z. I mean, there is no limit to what issues they can consider. So often, if you have evidence, you have very important information. If it's not presented in a format that, I mean, can make them easily understand, apart from the fact that they deal with all kinds of issues, they also don't have any specific academic or capacity requirements to be members of parliament. So you find a whole range of people with different capacities and so on, and different levels of understanding. So it's important that the format in which data is presented is important. And then the last issue that I want to highlight here is the issue of capacity. I mean, whilst it's an issue with production, it's also an issue with uptake. I mean, how do you get them to understand and appreciate not only maybe the format in which it's produced for them to easily read and understand, but also how do you get them to appreciate the fact that this is going to help them first of all in their careers, but also to help them help our country achieve the sustainable development goals. So I think, Emily, I'll stop here just for the sake of time. But I hope I have provided some background and history and where we are currently. I believe my colleague Omar will speak more to some of the specific issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashid. And just to recap for those who have recently joined us, I saw a few people coming in while Rashid was speaking. My name is Emily. I'm Senior Program Specialist at INASP, and we have with us Rashid Rahman from the African Centre for Parliamentary Affairs, Omar Seidu from the Ghana Stat Service, and Abraham bin Zakaria from Parliament. Unfortunately, Honourable Baba from the Poverty Reduction Strategy Committee in Parliament is not able to join us today. He's unwell and sadly unable to join the roundtable. And the next question was going to be more about the specific challenges that are associated with the access to and use of data by that particular committee and the work that DAP has been doing with that committee. I wonder, Dr. Zakaria and maybe Rashid to follow up as well after Dr. Zakaria. Is there a sense that you can give us maybe not particularly speaking for this committee as we don't have the chairman with us, but is there a sense you can give us of some of the typical challenges that committees experience in Parliament, in your experience, some of the typical challenges that they have with using data to understand the picture of the SDGs in Ghana. If there's a couple of examples you can give us of typical challenges that you find in your work with parliamentary committees, that would be great. Dr. Zakaria.
Right, thank you, Emily, for the question. Let me also thank participants and then fellow panelists who are here to discuss this issue. Let me thank Dr. Rashid for the insightful, background that he has given. It appears he's made my job very simple. Yes, usually we have challenges when it comes to sometimes providing evidence to committees and then some other, areas. If you look at the generation aspect, as Dr. Rashid mentioned, the data generation or data gathering department or institutions or structures in parliament, initially we had challenges with capacity, as he indicated. And in terms of capacity, we usually talk about numbers and then the skill mix. And so if you can imagine that you have 275 members of parliament, and then you also have about 16 select committees, and then we had just 9 research officers. That is a capacity issue. So if every committee is supposed to have a researcher, then you can imagine that some other committees would actually go without, research officers. And so such committees will always have, challenges getting the kind of data that they want to work with. Then, by the same token of the numbers, sometimes you find that researchers are placed on committees where they usually don't even have the expertise. We all come from different backgrounds, and then we thought we could have a very good skill mix to be able to meet, the taste and demands of all committees. But because of the sheer numbers, that has always been, an issue with providing, evidence to support, committees. Then, if I want to look at the uptake side, the politics one he mentioned is very, very key. The little evidence that you provide to committees are subject to, the political test, because when your data or your information doesn't meet, the taste, particularly the chairman, because the tradition is that when you are sending evidence to a committee, it must go through the chairman. The chairman must take it, the leadership must look at it, and then allow the other members to use it. Unless you put it on the website for every member to go for. But if you submit it to the committee, you then have that challenge, And then we also have this issue of the timing of the provision of the data, the evidence to the committees. Most of the times, the request for data or for any information to support committees can come just last minute. And it becomes very difficult for the researchers to be able to put together, a very, very concise, a very, very, comprehensive information for the committee. One of the areas that we do provide evidence to support committees is when there is a budget before the House. And then these budgets are referred to the committees. Sometimes the committees want the research teams to do some analysis of these and provide some evidence. And sometimes the budgets, the sector budgets are referred to the committees. Then the next day, the committees say they are meeting. And it takes a long time. You cannot just use one night to analyze a whole sector budget and provide all the things that are needed for the committee to be able to make use of this. And so these are some of the challenges that we usually face in terms of generating, data, in terms of providing uptake. We also have this issue of, access, because the research department, which is the main, data providing department, doesn't generate, the kind of data that are needed just within the department. We rely on data or information produced by think tanks, by other institutions that are outside Parliament, like the GSS and then others. Now, in the past, there had been this gap between us and the data generators. Research departments did not collaborate adequately, properly with these data generating institutions so that we can always have access to the information, access to data as and when it is ready. So you find that as we were grouping in the dark looking for information, the information were always somewhere, and they are also not aware that we have even a structure in Parliament that we can access this data. But for some of these things, I would say that they are becoming a thing of the past. For now, in terms of the capacity, in terms of numbers, this year, Parliament has recruited a lot of staff. We have increased our numbers from the 9 that we used to have to about 25. And so we are hoping that, that capacity issue will be a thing of the past. Then in terms of, the collaboration, under the project, the DAP project, we are seeing a very close collaboration between the research department and the GSS, and then we are talking. We now have this issue of placement where research officers will be placed under other think tanks, other experts within the GSS, so that we can collaborate and then pick information quickly as and when it is done. We've also been talking about establishing the SDG data, which we've gone far. We've gone far with that, and I think that is one of the areas that can make data, available in the research department, so that even on short notice, the information can be provided to the committees for use. So I'll stop here, and then probably we can take the discussions further as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zakaria. Really interesting backdrop there emerging around these general factors that affect production and use of stats and other forms of evidence in the parliamentary context in Ghana. I'm hearing the mention to timing, to access, to capacity in staff numbers and in skills, and also the importance of relationships, which we know is a really critical factor in general for parliaments and how they use evidence. And great to hear about the progress that you're seeing through the DAP project on that front. I wanted to ask Omar, if you could come in next, Omar, and outline what you think DAP tells us about democratic accountability and why that's important for the SDGs in Ghana. We know that DAP has a specific focus on using statistics in order to strengthen oversight of the SDGs. So what does that tell us about democratic accountability?
Thank you, Emily, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to my co-panelists and the others on the platform. Yes, effective democracy is all about accountability. That is the responsiveness to the society, the people, and the environment. And as we understand, the SDGs represent the aspirations of the people. The SDGs is nothing more than what our countries individually have all this while been seeking to do, because it has been through this process, it has been the responsibility of every government to ensure that they eradicate poverty, People have access, children have access to school. Everybody has access to healthcare. Everybody has access to water. And so if you look at it from that perspective, as the SDGs is the aspirations of the people. But then this is the first time consciously that the UN has put it together for all countries of the globe, not just for developing countries like in the MDGs. So being able to meet this aspiration of the people, it means that Parliament that represent the people need to understand the people, and they need to understand the environment in which the people live. So the data for accountability, which you already indicated, seeks to be the connector in this case by ensuring that Parliament better understand the people they represent and the environment within which these people live, so that they can better represent the people and also provide some kind of accountability through the institutions that have been set up to provide social services to the people. So the data for accountability basically is to ensure that the aspirations of the people are met, because that is the only way effective democracy can be achieved. So through that, the data for accountability is ensuring that we are able to provide some kind of evidence to parliamentarians to understand the people they are representing. What are the demographics of the people you are representing as a parliamentarian, for instance? What has been, for instance, enrollment in the area that you are representing, in terms of enrollment at the basic level, at the senior high level? How have children been able to transition from the primary school to the junior high school to senior high school? What has been the trajectory? And if we continue on that trajectory, how does it mean for the development of the area? So this kind of evidence is what the DAP seeks to provide to members of parliament to understand their people. Then the other flip of it is, as you understand the people, institutions like the Ghana, like the education service, like the health service, the water and sanitation authorities, budget yearly and receive taxpayers' money to provide services to the people. How have they been able to do that for the benefit of the people? So through data, these can be better understood so that the oversight roles of parliamentarians can be better achieved. So these are basically the things that the data for the accountability has been seeking to achieve. Understanding the needs of the people through data, understanding the environment of the people through data, and ensuring that these needs translate into outcomes that benefit the people. And at the same time, ensuring that we meet the aspirations without compromising the environment for the future of our children. So basically, this is what the Data for Accountability project is doing. And we have been able to do a lot of work in all these spheres within the period. And I'm sure that as we proceed on the discussion, many of the things will be mentioned. Rashid already touched on a couple of them. And this is the first time we have consciously put together data for members of parliament to help them better represent their constituents, and also to demand accountability from social service providers like the various line ministries in relation to the service delivery of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar, and thank you for reminding us and making the link for us of the importance of data, both for the representative functions of Parliament and the oversight functions, and also the exciting piloting of the constituency profiles, which we'll be hearing more about. I can see that Josephine is posting questions in the chat. Thanks very much, Josephine. We will come back to the questions in the Q&A session, and others, if you have questions, please do follow Josephine's lead and post those into the chat, and we will be sharing them with the panelists as part of the Q&A. The last question that I wanted to ask before we open up to the Q&A actually speaks to Josephine's comment there, which is to ask Omar, and maybe Dr. Zach, you could come in on this after Omar comments. What do you think that we can learn from DAP about the relationship between official stats bodies and parliament? So we know that that DAP had this unique window of opportunity, a sort of opening in the SDG structures in Ghana, as well as some reforms in the stat service and an interest in parliament in evidence use. And DAP has brought together, I believe for the first time, an official partnership between Ghana Stat Service and Parliament of Ghana to work on evidence use at this intersection. So what do you think that others can learn about this relationship that has been growing between GSS and Parliament? And maybe if you can mention when you're outlining as well, I know that there are formal kind of on paper aspects of that relationship, and there's also a growing informal relationship and growing sort of trust as well. So maybe you could speak to both of those things when you're outlining. And then as just after these comments, we'll open up for some Q&A.
Thank you. Yes, so what is refreshing for every statistician is to see evidence move into impact. By providing evidence, you would want to see that it helped change some social interventions, or it helped address some kind of social policies. Now, the Data for Accountability project is the first time in the history of the GSS that we have had an opportunity to engage the entire leadership of Parliament in a single platform. We have had the opportunity of meeting with the Speaker of Parliament, the Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, and the Clerk to Parliament. And this in itself provides an opportunity to engage and to understand the needs of Parliament and understand the needs of the national statistical system that is being coordinated by the Ghana Statistical Service. And that provides an opportunity to establish a relationship on how the major producer of data in this country can meet the needs of the major user. Because if, from the first question you asked, if we understand that for us to have good governance, we need to have the responsibility and, the responsiveness of the government institution. And so if the major user and the major provider of data are able to engage seamlessly in a way that let data influence or impact the evidence or decision making, then that is one of the greatest things. And for me, that provided us the biggest opportunity. Now, through this, we have been able to clearly establish what we call a window of opportunity. Because for the first time in the history of GSS, the government statistician was given the opportunity, okay, to address Parliament at the start of the 2021 population and housing census. In the past, the government statistician has had opportunity of going to Parliament, but that is when you are invited to respond to something, or when you have to respond to some budget queries or some other engagement. But for the first time in the history of GSS, proactively, the government statistician was provided a platform to come and address Parliament on the census. And that is one of the achievements of this particular program. Now, as Dr. Rashid mentioned earlier, we have also had opportunity where, for the first time, an SDGs or a statistics desk has been officially established within the Research Department of Parliament to provide an opportunity for the GSS and the Research Department of Parliament to interact and engage by ensuring that evidence move from the producer straight to the users. And you know, it's interesting, as we started this engagement, we have had the opportunity for a committee of parliament to invite GSS to be part of an orientation for the parliament, that committee of parliament. It's never happened. And exactly a week ago, the government statistician and myself had the opportunity of being invited to join the parliamentary committee to provide an orientation on poverty and inequality in the country. And if this continues, this provides an opportunity for them to better understand the data needs, for us to better understand their data needs, and they understand the challenges we have in providing data to them. And through these engagements, we just returned from a trip with members of parliament, where the parliamentary committee wanted to understand how evidence use at the local governance level is done, how the district assemblies use evidence in their budgeting and in their project implementation. So the Committee of Poverty Reduction Strategy of Parliament with ASEPA and GSS embarked on this field trip in one of the regions of Ghana last week, where the parliamentarians engaged with the district, we call them DPCU, the District Planning and Coordinating Unit, which is the heads of all the local or decentralized departments in the district who have the responsibility of planning and providing social services to the population. And it's again met with at the local level parliamentarians, which are the district, the assembly members, who kind of are the political leaders of the district. And these opportunities would never have been possible without this platform. And for me, this is the first and most important outcome of the entire engagement of that, because that is what we are seeking to do, to ensure that there is the use of evidence, not only in parliament, but also by the other arms of government. And these can only be institutionalized if the legislature, which is overseeing the work of the executive, is deeply involved in this and want to ensure that that remains a blueprint within the structures of the country. So for me, these are some of the things where I would say that the relationship between official statistics and parliament has been very good. And it is something that, as we see now, we believe we're going to grow stronger, because informally, some members of parliament have even reached out to some of us that, look, we want you to develop the same constituency profiles for our constituencies. An example is when we went, for instance, to the Upper East last week. Now, when we had an engagement with the district assembly members, for the first time, they were seeing data about their own district being presented to them for a 5-year, 6-year period, which they never knew. And this data was data that is collected already in the district. But consciously, this data have not been put together, okay, in kind of draw some kind of insight. What has been the growth, or what has been the development in terms of reduction in maternal mortality, reduction in children, infant mortality, improvement in vaccinations. And for the first time, when they were faced with this kind of reality, then they said, look, we have been shooting in the blindly. It means that we need to do things differently. And for me, this is what the Data for Accountability project is about. And I believe that as we continue to engage, we would be able to get much more results with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. I understand, Rashid, that you have some limited time with us today, so I hope you don't mind, Dr. Zakaria, if we switch up the order a little bit. I'd like to invite Rashid to also make a comment on what can be learned from about the relationship between stats bodies and parliaments from DAP, and then we'll have a comment from the parliamentary side on that relationship, and then looking forward to opening up to questions after that. Rashid.
Emily, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity once again. You know, I want maybe the participants to just pause for a minute and think about, you know, how parliaments work. I mean, not only our parliament in Ghana, talk about Uganda, talk about all the countries that are represented here. We all know that parliaments would continue to do their work every single day, whether you give them good data and evidence or not. So most of the time they will pass laws, they will vote the budget, and so on. They are not waiting for anybody. So I think we need to establish this very, very clearly. So in most cases, in most of our countries, I mean, bad laws are passed, budgets are passed that are not informed by reality, and so on and so forth. What we have been trying to do, particularly with the relationship between GSS and Parliament, is to, if you like, introduce a revolution in terms of how parliaments work. Make sure that you orient them in the direction in which I think they get to a point where they would always want or be hungry for data and evidence. I mean, at every stage in the piece of work that they do, whether it is, I mean, lawmaking, whether it is representing their people, or whether it's holding the government to account. I know this is not going to be an overnight affair. I mean, it's going to take a very long time. And as Omar said, before this project, and I believe maybe that might be the case in most other countries across the continent. That formal relationship, an institutionalized one between Parliament and the official data generating body, did not exist, at least in our country, and I can dare say in most other countries. So what we are learning from this is that, look, sometimes in most countries, when the data producing body, which is supposed to be independent, comes out and says inflation is in double digits, contrary to, for instance, what the government of the day is saying in order to polish its image and so on, then you see a clash between parliament and, if you like, maybe the political party that has power with the data generating institution. In this effort, what we have been trying to do and what we are learning is that slowly Parliament is beginning to understand how this data, all kinds of data, are generated by the data generating body. And we're also trying to make sure that Parliament becomes part of the conversation that eventually generates the data. So that whether you are in opposition or you are in power, the revolution we have started is to make sure that at the end of the day, when the data is presented to you, you take it as data that has a lot of integrity. You take it as data that you can work with, even if it stands at the opposite side of where your ideology and your priority as a country and so on stands. In the past, we have had in our country situations where the government statistician will come up with his data, and then you hear political parties, particularly those in opposition, at least I can cite a few instances, that will say, no, this data is not correct, this data is not true, and so on and so forth. We want to change the narrative. And I think if you get the buy-in, as Omar said, of the leadership of parliament, and slowly you are able to orient members of parliament towards the culture of relying on evidence to do their work. I think this narrative can change, and I believe that that would be a very good example for many countries across the continent. Because today, in our country as well as in many other countries, sometimes maybe because of perhaps lack of orientation and because of maybe the personal and party interests of members of parliament, you end up having them relying on data that is very, very dated. I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago data, which is used to inform decisions. When Umar and I and the government statistician went to see our Speaker of Parliament, who um, in his past life was a Minister of State about 10, 15 years ago, he told us something that was very telling. He said when he was Minister for Housing, the data that he used to inform the housing policy and development in general in our country was the same data that members of parliament are quoting today when they get up to make arguments in terms of how to shape policy in our country. And he says that this is wrong. And if this doesn't change, then we are always going to have it wrong, because if your policy is based on wrong assumptions and wrong data, and I think that that is the narrative that we are trying to change. And that is where we are seeing the benefit of the relationship between statistics generating body and parliament. And I think that there are lessons, I believe, for most of the countries that are represented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. Dr. Zakaria, do you have any quick comments to add on the relationship between Parliament and the Stats Service? Particularly, maybe if I can jump into the questions section, maybe you could respond to Josephine's question in your comments. She was asking whether there is consideration of an MOU with such institutions. So if you could answer that question, that would be great.
All right, thank you so much. One of the things that I can say about this relationship, a lot has been said about Umar and Rashid, is when the idea to establish the Sdg Decks in the research department came up under the project. We in the research department welcome it and we're happy about it because it offers an opportunity to access information from the right source, to interact with the right people. Now, when the idea was sent to our leaders, the Speaker of Parliament, the Clerk to Parliament, the reaction was that this is a fantastic idea. We should not just limit it to SDG data, but let's expand that DEX to what we call a data center. Now, this was coming from our bosses. They said we should expand it because having the SDG as SDG Decks problem might limit us to only data related to SDG. But we need more. We need more of such relationships. We need to have all kinds of data coming from anywhere apart from GSS, SDGs, and whatever, coming from academia. And then the next thing was that, fine, you cannot move from there if we don't have an MOU with all the institutions that generates data. And getting an MOU with all the institutions that generates data is enshrined in our strategic plan. We are required, it's one of the key strategic things that we have to do as a research department, that we have to sign MOU with all data generation institutions so that they can always give us the data that we need. The second thing is that with the establishment of the data center and with our relationship with GSS, one of the things the research department is learning is that GSS staff, the experts, are now training staff of the research departments on how to handle their data, because they are not supposed to just give us data they have analyzed. They have to give us raw data. The research department need raw data from GSS, so that as and when members or committees request any information, we should have somebody who has the technical know-how to analyze this data and then get the kind of information that the member or the committee needs. And so currently, one of the things we are learning is that GSS staff constantly, they are training us on how to handle what kind of data they have, what kind of data they generate, and how to handle it. And they are also asking us that we should also be looking at the data they give us and see the gaps. If we find that there are certain information that the house needs, which we cannot get from their data, we should draw their attention to it, so that in their subsequent data collection, they will have those ones be part of the questionnaires, so that they can improve upon the data that they have. So it's now becoming a two-way issue. Once we are benefiting from them, they are also seeking to see how we can assist them to improve upon the data that they collect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have a couple more questions. I'm going to ask Omar if you would like to respond to this one from Sam Hollingworth. In light of DAP, can you make some comment on the recent World Bank report, Data for Better Lives, drawing on insights from DAP? And Rashid, if you have a couple of minutes before we lose you, I wonder if you might be able to respond to the one from Kirchhoff's. What mechanisms has DAP put in place to sustain this relationship beyond the close of the project? What's the sustainability approach? And please do, those who are listening in, please do continue to post your questions in the chat box and we'll pick them up. Rashid, would you like to go first if you need to leave us?
Okay, all right. Let me go first.
On sustainability, in fact, great.
Yes, that's a very important question from Ketchups, and that is usually one big challenge. We have seen many projects in different parliaments that have ended and then gone away with all the things that they have done. But we have also seen, at least in my experience with the Parliament of Ghana, many initiatives that we started many years ago, and today they've become a feature of the Parliament of Ghana, even beyond the lifetime of the project. One important lesson for me, if you want to ensure and guarantee sustainability in most of these initiatives, is that at least you have to accompany Parliament for a little while, sometimes maybe 2 or 3 legislatures. So we started that in the 7th Parliament, and thankfully, I think thanks to the generosity of the Hewlett Foundation, we made a very strong argument because of all the challenges that everybody faced in the last couple of years and so on, and because of the fact that we want to make sure that this is really, if you like, adopted by the Parliament of Ghana. They've generously agreed to allow us to continue this project throughout the lifetime of the 8th Parliament of our country. So I believe this provides us a very important opportunity to ensure that the elements that make for sustainability perhaps are able to be realized. And what are some of these elements? I think first of all, in a parliamentary development project, you have to make sure that, just like in any other project, you have to make sure that the beneficiaries really see the benefit of the support that is being provided. And given some of the reactions that we are getting, we had a data fair. Omar referred to it at the Parliament of Ghana. We did constituency profiles. The speaker himself was there and appreciated that, and all the discussions that we've had between the government statistician, the Speaker of Parliament, and the leaders, I think we are getting the top hierarchy to begin to appreciate the importance of data in the work of the Parliament of Ghana, and to perhaps get to a point where maybe this can be a feature of their work. During the data fair, the majority leader and the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, when he was presented with some of the data and evidence from the constituency profile, one of the things that he told us was that, look, beyond members of parliament, he thinks that, members of the cabinet of our republic will need to see some of these data because of how compelling the data, is. And, if you get to this level of interest, particularly at the very high level, I think you are on your way to ensuring sustainability. And then, as I indicated earlier, in previous work that we have done, I can name two things that are now today part of the feature of the work of our parliament that were project initiatives. The work with the Public Accounts Committee of our parliament, the annual post-budget workshop that Parliament does. These were all things that we started as projects, and today Parliament has picked them up because of the benefits that that have been demonstrated. The work that we started with Star Ghana to help Parliament set up a parliamentary training institute. Today, I think the institute is there, is running. There is no single dollar or CD that is coming from any donor. Now it's part of the regular work of the Parliament of Ghana. So I think, Ketchups, to answer your question, we have learned a lot of lessons from previous work that we have done, and we are very conscious that if you engage for just a year or two and disappear, then you are likely to disappear with the kind of benefits that you have created. But if you engage for a long haul and you are able to get, I think, a critical mass to appreciate the benefits of what is being done, there will be uptake in the end, and your effort would continue even beyond the lifetime of the project. Thank you. Emily, I will continue to be available, but my colleagues from ASEPA, I think, are all online. So if there are any questions, of course, this is a team effort. I'm just a figurehead, and I think most of the work, as you know, you are part of the collaboration. Most of the work, I think, is done by my colleagues. So I think they are there as part of the participants, and I believe if my connection drops or for any reason I'm not available, I think some of them can step in to respond to some of the questions that will be posed by participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rashid. And also just to highlight to everybody that Verity has posted a link in the chat window to the learning that was shared at the midpoint of the DAP project. There was a learning report produced, and so do have a look at that. Now over to Omar for comments on the recent World Bank report, Data for Better Lives.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so that comment, we actually were very excited to see that post by the World Bank on the 13th of July. I think it is important to reflect on what actually brought about that and how far we have come, and why the World Bank, for instance, is citing Ghana as a good example of strengthening the data ecosystem. Now, with the outset of the SDGs, what we did was to try to establish what we call the national capacity assessment. So we undertook that in 2016, and that gave us the opportunity to reflect on what we need to do to bring up the country to the point where we can adequately monitor progress in the SDGs. And we realized at the time that most of the data we need for monitoring the SDGs were not available. In some cases, we had data, but that are not connected and that had challenges and some gaps that need to be plugged. And so we organized a data roadmap forum in April 2017 and came up with 3 key priorities. And the first priority was filling critical data gaps. The second priority was encouraging data use. And the third priority is strengthening the entire data ecosystem, because within the ecosystem, we have many players beyond the National Statistical Office. So for us to do this right, we have to strengthen these other players in. And so every program we are running today fit into at least one of these 3 priorities, including the DAP. The DAP project fit into all 3. And systematically, we are not only providing the data to Parliament, we are also working to strengthen the data systems themselves. And as you speak, for instance, we have an established partnership with Statistics Denmark to harness and strengthen administrative data. And we're working on building a data repository that becomes a one-stop shop where people can have access to data. Then we are working with other line ministries and other non-government agencies to build their data system in a way that we can leverage those data systems to support the country's growth. Because with the understanding that even if all investments go into the National Statistical Office, we cannot provide the data needs of the country all by ourselves. So what do we do to leverage data, for instance, produced by think tanks? What do we do to leverage data produced by civil society organizations? So it is this entirety of activities that got the World Bank commending the work we are doing and looking at it as an example. And we approach this without a basket of resources on the ground that we have to start with. We started, and then people saw institutions and others saw the value in the work we are trying to do, and then they came into support. And so with that, it means that even at the level where countries do not have all the resources, you can still make good of the systems you have and build a data ecosystem to the point where it can respond to the needs of the country. And I think these are some of the things the World Bank saw, and so prepared and published that blog on the 3 countries, including Ghana. So largely we are working in this space, and I would not say we are there. We are in the process, but I believe we are making a lot of strides. We are getting a lot of momentum by the day, because we are encouraged by, for instance, this platform. We are encouraged by the fact that members of Parliament on their own decided that, look, we want you to go out with us to help us do our work. We are encouraged by the fact that the majority leader, as Dr. Rashid said, look, this should not only remain here, the executive need to see this. We are encouraged by the fact that many more engagement by central government, by ministers, by ministries, and by other technical bodies in the country see the need to have National Statistical Office engaged. And these are the things that build the data ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. Yes, certainly. I mean, I think one of the things I found most exciting for DAP as well when we started working on this project was that it seemed to hit a sort of simultaneous moment of or window of opportunity in several different spaces at once. And one of those was the all of the thinking and the work that had been going on for a long time within the stats service and the stats system, thinking about the capacities that were needed and how to strengthen stats use and so on. And that seemed to coincide with a lot of thinking that had been going on for some time and through many different projects in Parliament around how to use evidence better and how to strengthen capacity for stats and so on. So one of the things that is striking about DAP, I think, for me certainly, is just the timing that the project managed to kind of start at that moment when there was all of this innovation happening, both within the statistics system and then also within Parliament. Dr. Zakaria, I think you had your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Thank you, Emily. I just want to make a quick comment on the issue of the sustainability, as raised by Ketchup. Dr. Rashid has, indicated a lot on the sustainability. One of the things I need to mention is that the collaboration that the project has introduced is one of the things that we are carrying forward, even to the point that the Parliament of Ghana has made it an activity in the strategic plan of 2020 to 2024, that we must collaborate. We must sign MOUs with almost all the think tanks, all the data generating institutions that that are in this country, so that even at the end of this project, it means once we sign these MOUs, we'll continue to access information from data generation institutions. The second sustainability issue is the establishment of the Sdg Decks. Now, the institution of Parliament has agreed that we should expand its mandate. We should expand its mandate to cover all other data that we can have access to. And so we're going to have a budget line for that center that will continue to provide information for us. So what it means is that even at the end of the life of this project, all those activities will continue to strive. And I think that there are indications that the project purpose or whatever would be sustained even when the project comes to an end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zakaria. I wanted to ask one question of the other panelists and one question of the participants. Participants, I hope you don't mind. I've been seeing the names of people that are joining, and I know we have here a number of other people listening in who have worked specifically on evidence issues with parliaments. We have some people from other parliaments in the region here with us today, and colleagues who have been working on this issue of how Parliament relates with other actors in the evidence system over a number of years in a number of different projects. So would be interested to hear in the comments box any thoughts that people have about how DAP's experience compares with yours, any advice or questions, things that struck you that might be different about what you've heard today. So that would be my sort of prompt for the participants here. Be really interested to hear from you how this resonates with your experience of working on evidence relationships with parliaments in the region. And then maybe while the participants are thinking about that, a question for panelists, especially for yourselves, Dr. Zakaria and Omar. What did you find personally most surprising about DAP, about the work that you've undertaken so far in DAP? We know, that Rashid has outlined, he framed it as a revolution in how Parliament works, and the first sort of formal or institutional relationship between GSS and Parliament. So for you, I know both of you have been champions of evidence use for a long time. You've been working on this issue across a number of different initiatives and with many different stakeholders. And what did you find most surprising or striking about the relationship that has been underway through DAP?
So if I should take it first, yes. When we started this project, it was a little worrying for some of us in terms of how Parliament itself would engage. You realize that at the beginning, we had opportunity of meeting with the parliamentary staff, but because of the timing, COVID and also the elections in 2020 made it difficult for us to have Parliament fully engage in this project. But you know, from the time we organized the data fair, that is from the 25th of May, May to this point, it's so amazing how much progress we have made with Parliament on this. And I recall our meeting with the speaker was early in April, and the speaker personally indicating that he is happy to increase Parliament budget around data and evidence. And then immediately we had the data fair, having the speaker himself coming down there, having the majority leader coming down there. And immediately after, we had opportunity of doing an orientation for members of Parliament. And the orientation ended with a member of Parliament for the first time electing to be part of an orientation we're doing for statistical service staff, so that he was available to engage with the staff, for them to ask and understand how they work in Parliament and how GSS can support their work. Then coming out of all that, Parliament go their own way, inviting GSS to come and do an orientation for them. And you know that this recent visit by GSS, ASEPA, and Parliament to the Upper East region was not originally one of the activities we have tabled. But given the kind of momentum, Parliament decided that, look, we want to take the work beyond what we are doing in Accra. We want to take it to the region. And for me, that was a surprising. And also being with the members of Parliament and the commitment, the enthusiasm, the whole of the 3 days we spent in Upper East was great. And if you look at it from that perspective, it gives me a lot of comfort and expectation that this is a program that has come to stay. And this is what I see to be, for me, the greatest achievement of this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Omar. Yeah, it's been really exciting to see across DAP. It's one of the things that tends to come up in project meetings and so on. We're talking about this project. It's always exceeding the initial expectations that it had around how to institutionalize evidence use and how to build the relationship. And so exciting to hear these invitations and initiatives growing beyond the scope of what was initially in the project approach. Dr. Zakaria, what was most surprising for you about the relationship with Ghana Stat Service?
All right, thank you very much. For me, coming from the research department, when we started this project, what surprises me most was the kind of data that Sdg Service has and how useful that data had been or will be for the use of Parliament. And we were not aware because we didn't have that close collaboration with them. And so when we got closer, we noticed that there was so much that Sdg Service has that could be of very good use to Parliament that we didn't know, even though they had all this, and perhaps they are also not aware that we're also in need of that kind of data. And so when we discovered it, I was very excited, and I know that that is a very good starting point. The second surprising thing was the technical assistance, not just the data, but the technical assistance that Sdg Service could give us in terms of training of our staff on how to handle their data. That was another surprising thing, because even though we are all researchers, sometimes it's difficult to pick a data from one side and be able to use it without actually being, taken through how to use it. But that was what Sdg Service did for us. And I think that was another good thing that we took on. Then finally, the enthusiasm with which the leadership of Parliament embraced this project, I was also surprised, because I initially was afraid. I thought that probably our leadership will not even take a second look at the project. So we're trying to see how we can get them. We're doing all things. So how do we approach these guys so that they will understand what this project is all about so that they give us the head start. And so when we got there and then they embraced it, that was another surprising thing to me. And I hope that with these things that with their acceptance of the project and then their understanding of the importance of the project to Parliament, then we're already halfway, through with success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had one other question in the chat window about how much do we know about usage of the resources that are being produced by the partnership and how we are measuring that. So I know DAP is just still finalizing the final the final learning product at the end of phase 1. So I'm not sure how much we might be able to say about that at the moment. But if anybody would like to pick that up, Omar or Dr. Zakaria or perhaps Agnes from SAPA, if there's anything we can say about that. And then we also have a comment in the chat window from Tumi. Thanks, Tumi. Flagging that there's a need for parliaments to make sense of the totality of evidence in order to make evaluative judgments about service delivery and hold the executive accountable. Thank you for feeding that in. And if you would like to, unmute yourself and make a comment in the discussion, please do. It looks like Rashid might be picking up on the usage question first.
Yes, Emily, can you repeat the question again? Let me just, I think the connection was.
So the question was.
Yes, the last one.
Yes. How has the DAP project been tracking usage of the resources that were produced by the partnership? And how does it anticipate sustaining that usage?
Well, I think perhaps maybe this question might be better answered by Dr. Zak, since they are the end users and beneficiaries of whatever we are producing. But let me just perhaps use the most recent activity that we have done with one of the committees on this along generating data and so on, and getting them to feed into the parliamentary process. As Omar said, I mean, we just came out of I mean, if you like, an evidence-taking activity by the Poverty Reduction Committee, and one of the outputs of this is a statement that we are producing, so that this statement would be made on the floor of Parliament, and then we'll get, I mean, particularly the leadership of Parliament, perhaps to begin to pay attention to some of the gaps that have been identified, and maybe where resources are needed. Perhaps those resources are provided through the budget, and we have the agreement of the leadership of the committee. But most importantly, I think discussions are ongoing with the Speaker of Parliament, because he is informed at every stage about some of what we are doing, particularly in this project, so that at the end of it all, if you have, I mean, this statement being admitted, and then you have perhaps the Speaker and the leaders around it, then we could say that, you know, at least some of the products are being picked up and are ultimately being used to inform the kind of decisions that are being made in Parliament. I don't know, perhaps maybe my colleagues can speak to maybe other previous examples, but I just thought I should pick up on this most recent one, just coming out of the activity from last week.
Yeah, maybe if I can give a particular example on this. Yeah, so if you look at the data value chain, where you want data to move from the production stage to the impact stage, where a decision is made or a condition is altered, or someone's well-being is affected as a result of data, you will realize that often the data we produce within GSS in particular, we end with the dissemination of the results. But for the entire value chain to be complete, we need to move to the point where there's uptake and there's impact and we are directly involved in the measurement of the uptake and the impact. Now, whilst this example may not at the early stages be related to DAP, but then at the uptake level, DAP has come in. And that is basically around the first time Ghana produced the baseline Sdg report in 2018, where we try to assess the national budget and understand the allocations for the various SDG targets. And this work was done by the GSS, the Ministry of Finance, and the National Development Planning Commission. And as a result of that baseline, the Minister of Finance in 2019 issued a directive that no government agency takes money from the consolidated fund without linking it to the SDG target and without showing which specific SDG target that money is going into. And that triggered an activity at the Ministry of Finance where they had to align all the SDG targets with the chart of accounts that exists in the country. Then we did the work further and we have currently published the third report in 2020. Now, what happened is when we made a presentation during the orientation with members of parliament, and when we made the colleague from Ministry of Finance made a presentation to members of parliament to see how budget is allocated. And of course, it is also captured in the constituency profile. So how budget is allocated and the specific SDG targets that local governments assigned to specific budget requests. Then the members of parliament said, look, this is an important piece that we need to take forward and go to the district and check what even informed the choice of specific SDG targets for the budgetary allocation and what activities are implemented to ensure that these targets are achieved. And so you see that this is a direct because the data used gets impacted in the lives of people when it gets to that stage where you would want to draw that linkage. And so if there would be an alteration of the way budget is allocated as a result of this activity, then that is a great impact that has been made. And for me, that is one of the areas. And this is something that resources, it doesn't matter how much it is, can ever achieve if you do not get this kind of result. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. Really interesting discussion here today. Thank you to all the panelists. We are wrapping up now. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to put panelists on the spot and ask them just to share very quickly what you think, by way of summing up, what has been most effective about the DAP project in terms of institutionalizing evidence use. So we'll just have one quick comment from each of our panelists to close, and thank you very much to all of the participants as well for your questions. We hope that you'll look out for the learning products and experience that's going to be shared by the project shortly. The links have been posted in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And just to hand over one comment from Alsepa, one from Dr. Zakaria, and one from Omar on this, what one thing, to sum up, is most effective about institutionalizing evidence use from the DAP experience. Omar, would you like to go first?
Okay, if I may start.
Yes, sure.
Yes, for us coming from Parliament, one of the things that I will mention is the establishment of the Sdg Decks, and because we have already taken it up to expand it to include all that, so that becomes an institutionalized, thing that we have in the research plan. It's going to be the DEX is going to be one of the units in the research department that will collaborate with all data generation institutions and will always have data around, even at the end of the project.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zach. Omar.
For me, it's more around the leadership buy-in of this engagement at the GSS, and to exemplify that, that by the Statistical Service Law, we are to establish the National Advisory Committee of Producers and Users of Statistics, which we did not envisage Parliament in the law, but based on this engagement, leadership and the board of GSS think that we need to have Parliament represented as part of the National Advisory Council of Users and Producers of Statistics. And for me, if there's anything that I'm so excited about, this is the fact that to provide us an opportunity to meet Parliament at all levels, for them to understand our need and for us to understand their needs as well.
Thank you, Omar. Last words from ASAPA. Rashid or Agnes, would you like to give a last word on behalf of ASAPA? Okay, I think we...
Yeah, hello, Emily.
Hi, Agnes. Please go
Quickly,
ahead.
this has already been said, but just to emphasize the buy-in of leadership, and then also the contribution of the parliamentary service to the successes of DAP, because we realize we don't only need leadership, you don't only need MPs, but the role of the staff is very important, and we are happy to continue supporting the research department and committees department to provide the support that they need to provide to MPs. Thank you.
Thanks, Agnes. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Really interesting discussion. Thank you to the panelists for sharing your insights. Have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Good day. Bye.
Bye.